Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Happy Friday morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. Today is July the 12th, 2024. If you are tracking live with us, you can get in our call queue today. So if you've got questions about financial issues that you may be facing, give us a call. We're here to help. 610-363-1110. So you'll be the first person in the call queue today. We've got a good bit to talk about today, so let's get right to it with our stewardship verse of the day. It comes from 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Well, it's clear to me from this verse that one main use of the resources that we've been trusted to manage is to care for those that God puts in our lives. Jesus said that others would know us to be followers of him by our love. Taking care of people is clearly the job of those that have been given the resources to do so. And when we do that, people experience the love of the one who commands us and comes to understand that it is really the Lord who is providing for them through us. Seth, what do you think?
It's good, Shana. No, I love that. You know, this verse, I think it can be applied, and it usually is applied to the general provision for family members. But, you know, the context of this in 1 Timothy is actually referring to specific provision for elderly household members, namely for widows. It was a really tough plight to be a widow in the first century. And apparently the church in Ephesus didn't do a good job of loving widows well. So Paul is reminding Timothy to remind them to love widows well. And this idea hits home that believers must provide for the needs of their family members. And I'd say that's true both presently and in the future, Shannon. It reminds me of what Dan used to say, that we must live as if Jesus will come back today, but plan as if he won't for another 100 years. So not only do we provide for our family members today, but we also need to provide for their needs potentially down the road when we're long gone. And, you know, it kind of leads to a topic for today, which is estate planning. I know this is one that you've talked about often, Shanna, but just to kind of start off here, what is estate planning exactly?
Well, estate planning is thoughtful preparation for the passage of God's resources that you managed while you were here on earth. So it is entirely true that we don't get to take earthly treasure with us to heaven. We never see U-Hauls behind hearses. And, you know, the odds are we're very likely to leave some resources behind. We will also most likely leave some people behind, souls, which are true wealth, who depend on our resources, whether that's, you know, if it's what some would consider to be an early death. We may have minor children that get left behind, or we may leave, you know, elderly parents or those who are depending on us for their financial well-being.
Yeah, that's really good, Shana. And why is this something that everyone, whether they're young or old, should treat with great importance? What do you think?
Well, it goes back to one of the founding principles in Scripture that we believe wholeheartedly here at the ministry, that everything belongs to the Lord. We are just called to be good stewards. We don't really own anything, despite of what it might say on the titles to our cars, the deeds to our house, the names on our bank statements. We don't really own those assets. They belong to God. We are just in a position of management or stewardship. So our estate plan, really, you can think about it as our final act of stewardship. So, you know, we don't want God's resources, whether it's money, which is what we think about, money and possessions when we think about stewardship, but children. You know, children are the most valuable gifts that we have been trusted to steward. So we don't want any of these resources to fall into the wrong hands, including Uncle Sam's. So estate planning is also, you know, future tax planning as well, because if you have any pre-tax money, if you've participated in an employer-sponsored plan like a 401k, or you've just done an IRA on your own, or maybe you've rolled your plan over to an IRA, you have an unintended beneficiary. I'm sure none of us intend to leave more than we have to Uncle Sam. So, part of estate planning is involves tax planning as well.
Yeah, that's good. So many young people I know, and even I fall into this trap too, we don't give a second thought about planning for when the day might come that we die. We assume I'm going to live another 30, 40, 50 years. Why do you think that is? And how would you advise us to think differently about providing for our future generations?
Why do I think it is? Well, I think young people are immortal, right?
Yeah, that's right.
we don't think about that. We tend to think that that's something that's going to happen way off in the future, and we have plenty of time to deal with it. But you know what? I've been working with people for, well over 20 years in private practice. And I can tell you that it's not just a phenomenon for young people. It's, even as people get older, nobody likes to talk about that. Nobody thinks it's going to happen anytime soon, unless, of course, you're diagnosed with an illness or, something like that. But, why people should be concerned about it, even young people? Well, for the reasons that I just mentioned. Seth, don't you want to be involved in choosing who would raise your children? If something happened to you, if something happened to you and Megan, wouldn't you want to have a hand in knowing who's going to be taking care of your children? Who's going to bring them up in the fear and admonition of the Lord, which is something that I know you would want for sure. Yeah. If you're a parent, you don't want the courts to decide who's going to raise your children. If a spouse is left behind, especially if you're the primary breadwinner, you wouldn't want them pressured to try to find a new husband or a new wife, whatever, to take care of them. You want to make sure that you make plans and ensure that what you want to happen will happen by getting the necessary legal documents for the custody of your children, making sure that the assets that you've accumulated are going to fall into the right hands. You also want to consider life insurance if you haven't had time to accumulate wealth to take care of them. This is especially important if you have special needs children, or it even becomes more complicated if you have a blended family.
Yeah, that's good. And you've answered this one throughout the course of our conversation, Shana, but any other key questions that we might need to consider as we're thinking about this?
Well, before you can decide where you want your stuff to go, you really have to kind of know what you're going to leave behind. Yeah. So the first step is to make a list of all of your assets. Try to think of everything. And then, rather than consulting a person in every decision, the first person we should consult is always God. It's all his anyway, so it makes a lot of sense to me to ask God where he wants his stuff to go when we don't need it anymore.
Yeah. And Shana, what would be some specifics? You had mentioned special needs children, other unique situations. What would be some specific advice you'd give to someone who has one of those more difficult situations? For example, a divorced couple, estranged from children, estranged from grandchildren, special needs, blended family. What do you think?
Yeah, that becomes really complicated, and I've dealt with a lot of situations over the years where, it's not fun, and it's not, a lot of times it's a very contentious conversation to have, especially if you have children from previous marriages, and then if you have children together, man, it gets really messy. But, you have to have those hard, candid, meaningful conversations with your spouse. If you get to a sticking point, which so many people do, it becomes, like I said, a point of contention, seek godly counsel. I'm sure that there's somebody, your pastor or elders at your church, that you could counsel with to come to some kind of agreement, because you really, again, don't want the courts deciding. You want to, have some influence there, and you don't want to not do anything because you can't agree on something.
Yeah, that's good. Last thing here, Shana, different legal documents we should have and the process of getting those made official. What do we need?
Yeah, well, certainly a will or a trust, making sure all of your beneficiaries are up to date. Will and a trust involve hiring a professional legal person like a lawyer. You want to have powers of attorney because, what's even worse if you don't die is if you become incapacitated, if you can't make financial decisions. The last thing that you want to do in a situation like that is have to try to go to the courts and get somebody appointed to be able to do that for you. You want to be able to have some influence and consider medical directives. So, that's something you don't really want to put the burden on somebody else to make healthcare choices for you if you're in a situation. You want to be clear about, what you want, because, it's, in my opinion, it's just a very loving thing to do, to have something down on paper that takes the pressure off of whoever might have to make those decisions. Well, this is a super interesting topic, and, I think we'll have Jason on Monday, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these documents, wills and trust and things like that. So make sure you tune into the second half of the show on this coming Monday.
On the day I found I was pregnant, I was full of emotions, and I just was so overwhelmed, and I don't know if I'm ready for this huge, life-altering, changing commitment. I had individuals around me not wanting me to have this child. And somehow, and I was driving, and I saw the Women's Help Center sign, and I immediately turned in. That just took relief off of me, and I was like, you know what? It's gonna be okay. They gave me the confidence and the support that I needed to be able to go out and face the world. First time I held Finnegan, I just lit up with joy. I was so excited. This little boy that I had in my life, he is loving and generous. Watching him just grow and flourish into this incredible human being has just been so rewarding and so uplifting. Looking back, I don't know what I would do without him, because I needed him more than I think he needed me.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Today's Friday, so we're going to get caught up on all of the week's financial news, because at Financial Issues, we help you to stay in the know about the financial issues of the day. We keep you abreast of what's happening in the economy and the markets and help you understand how this impacts your own personal financial issues. So, takeaways from this week that is ending on July 12th, 2024. I guess one of the biggest news stories was Powell's testimony to Congress. He goes, I believe it's twice a year, two or four times a year. He goes and makes a presentation to the Senate and the House of Representatives, and everybody gets their turn to ask questions and all of that. So the gist of it was, and this is what Powell said, this is a quote from Powell: "We continue to make decisions meeting by meeting. We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could stall or even reverse the progress that we've seen on inflation. At the same time, in light of the progress made both in lowering inflation and in cooling the labor market over the past 2 years, elevated inflation is not the only risk we face. Reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment." So clear to me that they are seeing the cracks in the labor market and they are taking those seriously. Well, no guidance on the timing of rate cuts was given by Powell when Louisiana Senator Kennedy asked the biting question of when. And one thing that we didn't hear anything about was the direction we can expect the Fed's balance sheet to go. So the Fed is the enabler of government spending, or has been of recently. They monetize the debt. When Congress spends money that we don't have, they have to borrow it. And in order to borrow it, somebody has to lend it. So the Fed's been doing that. And inquiring minds, mine included, wanted to know if quantitative tightening will continue and how far it will go. So QT is the Fed's their balance sheet exploded. It was $4 trillion before the pandemic. It ballooned to $9 trillion because they bought just about all the debt that Congress was issuing as a response to COVID. And now they've just been letting that kind of roll off of their balance sheet. They've been, more has been coming due. Like if you have CDs, you get your money back. So more has been coming due than what they're buying, but the balance sheet is still a whopping $7.2 trillion, almost double what it was before COVID. So this, we've got a clip for you, but this one part of Jay Powell's testimony made me wonder if he has any credibility at all. You just have to see for yourself. Watch this.
Chairman Powell, to the best of my knowledge, the last public meeting between you and President Biden occurred on May 31st, 2022. Does that sound accurate?
I'm going to take your word for it.
You had any private meetings with the president since that time?
No.
Any phone calls with the president?
Nope. I don't believe so.
Is there any reason why you've not met with or spoken to the president?
I meet with, when any president calls you, you come and you meet, but that hasn't happened. So
in over 2 years, with inflation still nagging us, with cost out of control, President Biden has not asked to meet with you in over 2 years?
I haven't had a meeting with him. He hasn't sought a meeting. And of course, I don't seek meetings. So
do you acknowledge, or do members of the FOMC acknowledge, that a rate cut in September could be viewed as political just 30 to 60 days before an election?
So our undertaking is to make decisions when and as they need to be made based on the data, the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks, and not in consideration of other factors, and that would include political factors.
In your meetings with the president, have you noticed any mental or cognitive decline?
No.
Have you noticed any mental or cognitive decline? Man, we cut it off just a tad short. I wanted you all to see his response. It was a quick no. You know, he said
nothing
no.
To see here.
Nothing to see here. No mental decline noticed in the president. I guess he didn't watch the last presidential debate either.
Yeah, or
but
last
I guess,
night's press conference either.
Right. With talking about Vice President Trump.
Yeah. It's sad. It's really sad.
It is sad. So, where has he been? Does he not watch these things? It makes you wonder, is he oblivious to what's happening in the White House, or is he lying? You and I said we have zero access to the president, except for what we see, out there that gets reported, the speeches that he does, the debates that he does. And, sure, there are, groups that put these clips together and really exaggerate maybe some of the things that are happening. But I don't know. It's clear to see. But
and
that clip
Shana,
was
with this too. It just got me thinking with the legacy media. Like if you go on any legacy media site, except for maybe one or two of them, they're going to promote Biden and all the good stuff that he does instead of giving us the real picture. So you're exactly right. What we see is a tiny, tiny sliver of what might be true. Most of it's probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
So Al Green, a Democrat from my state, unfortunate to say, quickly moved to have all of that struck from the record because it was apparently against some of their procedural rules or something like that. And the clip was actually a little bit hard to find. I guess they really did kind of take it out. But speaking of inflation, which is one of the dual mandates for Congress, we got CPI and PPI out this week. So June CPI, which measures consumer inflation, for June unexpectedly fell by 0.1% earlier this week versus the estimate of it being up 0.1%. A 2% drop in energy prices month over month for the second month was the main driver of that headline decline. But we still have that wild card of shipping rates to factor in when we think about inflation going forward. Shipping rates, by the way, talked about that recently, have skyrocketed since the beginning of the year, moderated a little bit for the week, so that is somewhat good news. Now, the core rate of consumer inflation, where you strip out food and energy, which I think is a little bit less relevant to the individual consumer, since food and energy is what we spend a good bit of our money on, came in higher by 0.1% versus the expectation that it would be up 0.2. So CPI moderated year over year since last June. Headline CPI sits at 3% and the core rate at 3.3%. So last month, the headline number was 3.3%. Down to 3% year over year now. Core 3.3 versus 3.4 in May. Now, we won't get PCE, which is the Fed's preferred gauge of inflation, and what they talk about when they talk about that target getting to 2%. We won't get that number until later in the month, around the 26th of the month. PPI for June came in this morning, came in higher than expected, and all 6 metrics last month for last month's numbers were revised upward. So PPI doesn't get as much of a splash as CPI does, but PPI, which is Producer Price Index, came in 0.2% up month over month, sits at 2.6% year over year, 0.4% if you strip out food and energy, up 0.4% month over month, 3% year over year. The other big news is earnings season, which is underway and set to get into full kickoff into full gear next week. Second quarter earnings for the S&P 500 companies are expected to have jumped 10.1% year over year, based on some data from LSEG, accelerating from 8.2% in the first quarter. So lofty goals for corporate America, and it won't be enough just to beat estimates. The emphasis again this quarter is going to be on that forward guidance. So just a couple of notable reports here. Helen of Troy stock dropped 30% on its earning release. Now, that's a company that makes outdoor products, health and beauty products. Think Braun, Curlsmith, Drybar, Vicks, Revlon, so on and so forth. The CEO of Helen of Troy said this in their earnings call on Tuesday. The macro environment and the health of consumers and retailers has worsened. Consumers are even more financially stretched and are even further prioritizing essentials over discretionary items. If other retailers confirm what they're saying here, this sounds very recessionary-ish. I guess I just made up that word, but
we'll copyright it, Shana. That's ours, folks. Okay.
Pepsi also missed sales estimates and saw a drop in volumes in the quarter. In their earnings release, they mentioned the subdued category performance within North America convenient foods, among other reasons. So other reasons, maybe GLP-1s, the weight loss shots that people are getting that are muting their appetites and causing them to not buy as much junk food, I guess. Or is it recessionary behavior, pinching pennies and cutting back? Well, results for PepsiCo beat analysts' profit expectations, but missed on revenue and lowered its full-year organic outlook. Their shares fell as a result. Delta slightly missed both top and bottom line estimates, but they reported that peak summer travel demand remains strong. The financials were out this morning. Not a lot of big news. I don't have time to get into the details there. Maybe we'll do that a little bit later in the show. But the markets on Thursday came back to earth following Wednesday's strong output as the tech sector saw some sell-offs from recent gain, and the NASDAQ was down 1.95%. Year to date, the S&P 500 is up 17% following a strong performance in 2023. The technology sector and telecommunications sector, namely AI trend, is what is pushing that further. The party in the market looks like it's going to continue with inflation moderating, labor markets weakening, and $6 trillion sitting on the sidelines waiting to join the party. Up on deck for next week, more Fed speak, retail sales, and earnings season in full force. Well, now that you're in the know about the recent and upcoming financial issues, we hope you'll learn more about our ministry and how we can help you integrate those issues into your own stewardship. Find out more about how we can help you defund darkness with our biblically responsible investment strategy. Well, folks, if you listen on a station that only carries the 30-minute version of the show, we have to bid you a farewell. If you want to catch the full show, go to financialissues.org/live or download the FISM app to get every live show and all of the past shows for free. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter while you're there. For the rest of you, we'll be back for more. Hi, this is Shana, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Every time I turn on the news, I get so frustrated. When I read a headline, it's obvious they're just trying to manipulate me for clicks and views. I just want to stay informed about what's going on without all the drama and opinions. I knew I needed to find an alternative, and thankfully I found FISM News. They keep the viewers up to date with all the latest news without the extra noise. Check them out by going to fismnews.tv. That's fismnews.tv.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Well, this property was actually purchased by my great-grandfather, and we were able to come back to the farm a few years back to keep the family farm, hopefully, in the family.
Working together is a lot of fun sometimes and can be very challenging.
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
We want to try to provide the freshest possible and healthiest possible produce for our neighbors and our friends and the people that we are able to touch in their lives at the farmers markets. Samaritan Ministries is a perfect fit because we feel like we can actually partner with other Christians to help them provide for their medical needs.
We're Tony and Ginger Malik, and we are Grandma and Grandpa's farm in Sparland, Illinois, and we are Samaritan Ministry members.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Today's Rapid Fire Friday, and our phone lines are open. 610-363-1110. If you've got questions about financial issues, biblically responsible investing, or strategy, or anything else that you're wrestling with, any other financial issue that you're wrestling with, or if you just want to say hi to Darlene.
That's right.
If you're part of the Darlene fan club.
That's right. The ever-growing Darlene fan club, by the way.
Yes.
That's awesome. You got fans right here, Darlene, that's for sure.
That's right. Well, the markets have opened, and they have opened in positive territory in spite of the slightly hotter than expected PPI reading. This morning, the Dow is up about 1/4 point. NASDAQ sort of flat, barely in positive territory. S&P up 0.13%. The 10-year Treasury up a little bit to 4.2. And the 2-year sitting at 4.485. So we are still sitting with an inverted yield curve where short-term rates are higher than long-term rates. And something that kind of caught my attention this week, something I've been following a little bit in the background, is the Treasury auctions. So when our country wants to borrow more money than we're bringing in, and they want to spend money that we don't have, they have to issue debt, and they do that in the way of Treasury auctions. So Treasury auctions have been struggling a little bit this year as we've seen our buyers sort of go away. There's been a lot of loss of interest in U.S. debt by foreign banks. China, Japan, they're buying far less of our debt than they have in the past. The Fed, jumped in to the rescue during the COVID era, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the show. But they're tightening. They're saying that they're letting debt roll off. They're not buying as much as they had in the past. So we've seen some weak auctions. That's not a good thing for our country. This week, the auctions have been going a little bit better, probably because rate cuts are on the horizon. So, those who are interested in fixed income and filling the holes in their portfolio, really, as far as individual investor goes, but institutions, they see maybe rates peaking out right now and moderating in the future. So that's probably the reason for the better yield. But we've got moderating inflation. We've got a weakening job market. This gives the Fed cover to cut. So now I think there's close to a 90% chance that the Fed will cut in September. We do have a rate decision coming out at the very end of this month. I think the odds for that are still pretty much that rates will stay the same and get cut in September. But, we've got this moderating inflation, so to speak. I'm still not convinced that we're going to continue going in the right direction. But we have a weakening job market. We've seen unemployment start to rise. We've hit one of these economic triggers that says that is very very recessionary-ish. Use that word again.
There's another one, trademark.
Where the unemployment rate now, if the 3-month average for the unemployment rate is now 0.5 point higher than it was at the beginning of the year. So, we're seeing we're seeing unemployment rates go up. So it seems though that people were motivated to buy treasuries because they're turning a blind eye to the exploding debt and the ongoing outrageous mismanagement of our country's finances, and they're loading up on higher interest rates while they can still be found. So GDP, which measures the growth of our economy, is slowing. Tax receipts, which are our source of income, are faltering in spite of a headline that I saw that the IRS has been able to collect a good chunk of back taxes. But we have a faltering tax receipt situation. We're spending money that we don't have. That's probably going to continue into the future. But hey, let's turn a blind eye to all that and let's just borrow more money and let's enable the U.S. to keep borrowing more money. So logic is out the window, I guess. But when you're the best looking horse in the glue factory, you get your debt bought.
Sure do. You know, Shana, I saw an interesting headline. Actually, it made me think of the story that you'd shared a couple of months ago, I think from your trip to Florida, about the ridiculously priced burgers. But Wells Fargo reported recently that hamburgers at home are 3 times cheaper than at a restaurant. Very interesting here. The Agri-Food Institute team at Wells Fargo found that a quarter-pound burger cooked at home with all the fixings costs roughly $2.16 compared to the average patty in a restaurant with all the fixings, which is just under $7. According to one of the experts, when you go to dine out, of the total cost you're paying, only 30% of that is for food. Love to hear your thoughts on this, Shannon. It seems to me that if our listeners out there are looking for ways to save money in this ridiculous economy, one place to start might be at home, cooking food at home. What do you think?
Yep. I think that's a good thing, and it's a good thing for the family, too.
Yeah.
But, you know, that $6.95, that sounds more like drive-through than dine-in.
Yeah, it does. It does, right.
And it's certainly not if you're on the beach walking right off the beach into in a resort town, I guess.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's really because it kind of conflicts with a personal story that I have. We went out to eat the other night at a Japanese restaurant, and our cook, you know, where they cook in front of you and everything, and we were talking about, you know, how much prices have gone up, and, you know, he said his experience with his family, he said it's just as expensive to cook at home as it is to eat out. And he said, you know, if you go to the grocery store, all of the supplies that you have to buy, he said, you know, it's almost the same for him dining in or eating out. So I guess it's all relative, and perception is reality for lots of folks too.
Yeah.
But
and it's all expensive either way. I mean, dining in or eating out, you're going to spend a lot of money, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. You know, that's just, inflation may be slowing, but, you know, we can't, I don't know, I think food prices are up somewhere like 30% over where they were 3 years ago. And,
son of a gun.
You know, even though inflation is slowing, we're not having deflation. Prices are not going down, really. So, you know, cooking at home isn't a bad thing for family interaction as well. So stewarding those people resources that we've been given as well.
It's good stuff. And teaching them also. That's something Megan has started to do with Eloise, is teaching her how to cook, which is pretty cool.
Yes, very.
It's good stuff. Shannon, we had a couple comments coming in on social, if you want to get to those before the ag.
All right.
Candace on Facebook saying, so thankful for you all on financial issues. We're thankful for you, Candace. Appreciate that.
Yes, we are.
That's awesome. Jay is asking Shanna, what does financial issues think about, sorry, I just lost my page there. What does financial issues think about, I believe it's CD prices. I actually just lost the comment there, so I might have to get back to that in just a moment there.
Okay,
but,
we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we can get to that after the ag, if that works.
Probably don't have a lot of time left.
Yep.
Folks, I hope you joined Seth for Bible study this morning, and you'll sign up for that. Or you don't even have to sign up, but you can just go to our website and find the information there. Join him every Friday morning for Bible study.
Yep,
well,
we had a good time.
We're going to hear from Craig Haugaard with the Ag Report. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back. Maybe we can get started with Rapid Fire Friday. 610-363-1110.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for July 12th. Well, grains were propelled higher yesterday by a weak U.S. dollar and position squaring ahead of today's monthly USDA supply and demand report. Corn was also supported by the forecast for a drier than normal pattern over much of the nation's midsection in the coming weeks. At the close, December corn was 3.5 cents higher at $4.10 3/4. Yesterday brought us two-sided trade for soybeans. Soybean experts were at the low end of expectation as Brazil continues to be the go-to provider for beans into Asia. Brazil's discount to U.S. FOB beans is 25 to 30 cents per bushel into China. At the close, we had November beans 3/4 cent higher at 10.67 3/4. Wheat was a Russian story as news that Ukraine had captured a ship claiming to be carrying Russian grain. Now, Ukraine claims that the ship was loaded with stolen Ukrainian grain, and traders Traders, fearing that this could escalate the war between the two nations, were quick to buy wheat futures. At the closing bell, Minneapolis September wheat was 7 3/4 cents higher, 6.18 3/4. Kansas City rose by 18 1/4 cents to close at 5.83 3/4. And Chicago 9 3/4 cents higher at 5.71 1/4. Cotton futures spent the session just chopping sideways. At the closing bell, December futures were 6 points lower at 70.87. Livestock futures all posted a higher close. We had October live cattle futures up 30 cents at $183.50 per hundredweight. August feeder cattle were $1.80 higher at $256.15 per hundred. And October lean hog futures rose by $1.07.5, ending the session at $69.40 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures moved back towards their recent support level. When the closing bell rang yesterday, we had August futures 22 points lower as they settled at $19.97. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common, the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Welcome back to Financial Issues. Well, we've got a little bit more than 10 minutes to get some rapid fire Friday questions answered. So if you've got a question, don't be shy. Call in 610-363-1110. I can almost guarantee you that if you have a question about something, you're not the only one. So be brave. You'll probably help a lot of people by asking your question. 610-363-1110. Well, let's do social and...
Sounds good. Let's start with Jay, Shana. I apologize. I kind of had a little bit of a Biden gaffe myself. I lost my notes, and sorry, that's not very nice. Jay from Texas saying, what does Financial Issues think about the length of time for a CD? I think, Shana, he's wondering about maybe our opinion on shorter CDs, longer CDs, which one's the best?
Okay, so I just pulled up, I'm looking at like a list of rates. The highest rates are going to be in the 6 to 12 month range. What I'm seeing is right at about 5.3 are the highest offered across the country. If you have a brokerage account, you can get in and you can do a search for brokered CDs. You can shop banks all over the country. So that seems to be really the sweet spot. What I would say, though, is that you want to follow a laddered approach. So even though the 2-year rate is not a whole lot less, it's about half a point less than the 1 year, but I think what's going to end up happening when the yield curve does stabilize, you're going to see when rate cuts happen, the market's going to go up, but we're going to see CD rates go down because financial institutions are no longer going to have to pay that high interest rate. So you're not going to see a 1-year CD at over 5% once rates really start to come down and moderate. So the best approach, just like with a principle that pervades our investment strategy, is diversification. So build a ladder. Do a 6-month, a 1-year, an 18-month, and a 2-year. And then what happens is you'll have money come and due every 6 months, and you'll be able to shop for the best rate. In a normal interest rate curve, the longer you go, a 2-year rate would normally pay you more than a 1-year or a 6-month CD. So as that yield curve starts to normalize, maybe in 6 months, when that money comes due, you can get a higher 2-year CD. You'll still have money coming due every 6 months, and you end up with all longer-term CDs, but with staggered maturity dates so that you still have money coming up.
Nice, Shana. Claude is up next here from Louisiana. Just got this question in a moment ago. He said, what, if anything, causes deflation? He says, I can't really remember deflation ever happening. Any advice for Claude?
Deflation has happened. It typically is brought on by a recession when things get really, really bad. So it's not really a case that is good from an overall economic standpoint. Now, I know you and I would like to see prices go back down to where they were, but, considering the extenuating circumstances, everything else that's happening, deflation would probably not be a very good thing to see happen for the overall economic picture.
Good stuff. Tanya's up next over on Ask Shana here, 56 years old. She says, Shana, I'm a fairly new partner to FISM, and I keep hearing you all talk about rebalancing. Can you explain in layman's terms how to do that? I'm very overweighted in ETFs, and I'd like to know what I should do in this case.
All right, Tanya. Well, welcome to the Financial Issues family. You're a new partner, I see there. So I hope that you have found and are using the portfolio tracker. That's one of the tools that we offer you as a partner at Financial Issues. And you have all of your, I'm assuming that you do have all of your holdings on there because you can see that you're overweighted in ETFs. So rebalancing means that you're looking at your current situation. When you click on the output, you're going to see where you are in every sector as compared to the target for the model that you're following. So if you're overweighted or you have too much in one sector, that means that you've got to get rid of some things. You've got to sell some things, and you've got to reallocate that money or rebalance your portfolio, reallocate that money to a sector that you're underweighted in. So if you're overweighted in the ETFs, that means that you have to trim some of your positions to generate the cash to fill in the holes in your portfolio.
Nice. Next one is Deanna, or maybe Diana, probably Diana, 75 years old. She says, I have both E22 and E44. Will all of my stocks be added together under one company when the final acquisition is finished? And of course, Shana, this is referencing, I believe, E22 buying out E44. She's wondering, how does that work? She's 75.
Yep. So you're on the right track there, Diana. Yes. So if you own both E22 and E44, it's very likely that E22 is going to acquire E44. And what would happen is that most likely you would just end up with a lot more shares of E22 and have no more shares of E44. Knowing the historical performance of these two, now I don't know when you bought them, but if it's been a while, you might already be overweighted in one or both positions, and you probably would be overweighted for sure once those two are combined. So if and when that happens, you'll want to probably pare back some of your position.
Good stuff. Next one here, Shana. I believe this is Stefan, 53 years old. He's asking, at the risk of asking a question anathema to FISM's long-term investment emphasis, does BRI to assist stock selection also apply to stock options? I ask, since the options market can influence stock price, but is not providing funds for company use. What would you have for Stefan there, Shana?
So that question is definitely in anathema to our long-term strategy. So I guess to answer the question, though, and you're right, the money that you may use to purchase options, and I'm not even going to say invest in options because they're not really, I don't know, it's not really an investment. It's more akin to gambling, or I guess some people will say you can hedge your positions by doing this. So the money does not represent, if you buy options, it does not represent ownership in a company. So I guess technically you could say that options are BRI neutral. But again, options are not part of our strategy. What options are they're a type of financial derivative, and they give the buyers of options the right, but not the obligation, to buy or sell an underlying company. So, what do you do if you plan on, if you think, well, I'm going to buy this option because I think on this non-BRI stock because I think the price is going to go down, and then that happens, are you going to exercise the option to buy that non-biblically responsible company? So, I don't know. I mean, again, not part of our strategy, not something that I would suggest, but to answer the question, I guess they would be, in a Rapid Fire Friday kind of way, they would be BRI neutral.
Yep, good stuff. Next one here, comment, Shana, from John. He's saying, I've been a member since 2016. Since then, I've been using the 65 to retirement model. As I don't plan to retire at age 85, using the models like building an engine with my sectors representing the pistons, I noticed after 8 years, my investment engine has really kicked into high gear this year. It's protecting my portfolio against volatility and providing steady growth. Not that far behind the S&P index. He's 76 years old. Well done, John. That's good.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Well, that's really you We appreciate that you share in your experience there, and we hope that motivates other people to become partners with us. And it's interesting here that he compares his portfolio to the S&P index because it says that it's not far behind it. Well, some people might think, well, if it's behind the S&P, then it's not doing really great. But, one thing that is good for us always to remember, and I think most people want to compare, we always want to compare our portfolios to something. And the something that we hear the most about by far is the market. Whether it's the S&P 500, whether it's the Dow or the NASDAQ, we are even complicit in telling you what's happening with the markets just about every day here at Financial Issues. But you don't want to fall into the trap of judging your portfolio against the S&P 500 because the S&P 500 is 100% equity stock index. So it's made up of, what are supposed to be 500 of the largest U.S. domiciled stocks or companies in the United States. When you build a portfolio with us, odds are, especially at age 76, you're not going to have 100% equity portfolio. So not a really great comparison. Always remember that when you're comparing your performance to the market. Take into consideration your risk tolerance. If you don't have, to be 100% in stocks takes a really high risk tolerance because there's a lot of potential for volatility there. So if you can't stomach that, don't ever compare your portfolio performance to the S&P 500. Well, folks, that ends Rapid Fire Friday for us. We hope that you will come back next week because, Lord willing, we're going to be here to help remind you that everything we have belongs to the Lord. There is a test coming because the Master's coming back, and he's going to ask us how we handled those resources that we were trusted to manage. We want to help you be found a good and faithful steward with our biblically responsible investment strategy. Find out more at financialissues.org and come back next week for more Financial Issues.
The If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.